You ready, Mr. Scalise? I'm ready. Okay, I didn't know if you had to walk out or there was some other event. Excellent, just check. No, quite all right. Morning, everybody. We're here in the Village Hall boardroom. This is the Broadview Westchester Joint Water Agency meeting for Wednesday, May 13th, 2026. It is 10:32. Can you please call the roll?
Yep. Mayor Riebel.
Present.
Mayor Thompson.
Present virtually.
Administrator Jones.
Here.
Manager Crumstock.
Here.
Mr. Scalise.
Here.
Trustee Jones is absent.
Can we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 3, public comment. Anyone from the public wishing to speak, please do so. Seeing none, we have item 4, presentation of the minutes of the April 1st, 2026 board meeting minutes and the April 22nd, 2026 board meeting minutes.
Motion for approval.
Second.
Do we need a roll? All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. Item B, monthly financial reports for March 2026 and April 2026. Thank you.
Good morning.
Morning.
So for March, the total cash and investments were approximately $12.6 million, with a net income year-to-date of $2.9 million. As you recall, in prior months, we were trending below budget for water revenues. However, adjustments resulting from the prior year's finalized audit brought additional revenues into the current fiscal year. As a result, water revenues are now trending above budget, putting us in a stronger financial position. And this is also further supported by the interest revenue, which is also exceeding budget expectations. The operating expenses continue to trend below budget, with approximately 15.5% of the budget remaining, with only 8.3% of the fiscal year left. This equates to about $1.2 million for the final month of the fiscal year. The monthly activity was generally consistent with expectations, with the exception of the third payment on the reservoir project, which totaled $583,320.64. Is there any questions?
Any questions?
No.
None.
Any questions, Mayor Thompson?
No. But before we move on, I don't know if it has been approved for me to participate electronically, so we need to formally
Okay.
do that so that I can participate.
Absolutely. Do I have a motion to approve remote attendance by Mayor Thompson?
Motion.
Second.
Roll call?
Mayor Riebel.
Yes.
Administrator Jones.
Yes.
Mr. Scalise.
Yes.
Manager Crumstock.
Thank you.
Thank you. No, I don't have any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Item 5, communications, new business. Item 1, consideration and approval, finance reports as of May 13th, 2026, and check detail report for the period ending April 1st, 2026 through May 13th, 2026 in the amount of, please, I'm sorry, in the amount of $1,208,865.84. Check numbers 30268 to 30297, along with an ACH payment number of 50011. Do I have a motion?
Motion for approval.
Second.
Discussion. Any questions? No. Any questions, Mayor?
No.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Riebel.
Yes.
Mayor Thompson.
Yes.
Administrator Jones.
Yes.
Mr. Scalise.
Yes.
Manager Crumstock.
Yes.
Item 2, consideration and approval, ordinance number 2026-03, an ordinance approving certain updates to a schedule of water system regulations, water rates and service rates, a water system tap-on fee, administrative services fees and charges, Freedom of Information Act fees, and personnel regulations for the Broadview Westchester Joint Water Agency. This is amendments to Section 3 for the water rates, Section 9 for finance matters, Exhibit E, financial and investment policy to increase the water rates in response to the City of Chicago's 2026 water rate increase, and to update terms and designate authorized account access and authorized signatories of account in the agency. Motion and a second.
Motion for approval.
Second.
Discussion. Council.
Yes, yes, I have, discussion with the, fees for the water rates. This came up in our last regular board meeting as it relates to the increases for water rates. Do we know what the percentages are for the water rate increase?
Being gathered, stand by, I believe.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Please.
The increase to the water rates was the same 1.85% that the city was passing on to us, so it was just us passing that on to the customers.
Thank you. I just wanted to, have that noted for the record. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Any further questions?
None.
No.
Yes, sir. Council.
My mic on, I gotta remember to do that. Just for record purposes, that 1.8%, last year, the water rate per 1,000 gallon to the villages was $6.82. Starting June 1, it will be $6.95. So that's for the two village customers of the agency. For the other customers of the agency, your hospital facilities, the 2025 current rate was, my page didn't print, I apologize for that, but the new rate is $8.41. So that's, it's going up again.
15 cents.
It's in my memo,
Yeah, it's
15
15
cents. Yeah, I know. So there's that. I would recommend we approve the, those water rate increases in the schedule and the ordinance as presented, but hold off on approving the update to the fiscal policy, which is the Exhibit E. We still need to circle back, Wesley, Lauterbach, and Amon and I, to clarify some terms and to get some input from the auditor, not the auditor, excuse me, your finance folks at Lauterbach, Amon, on the fiscal policy. We haven't updated that since 2011. There's some use of terms like finance director and treasurer that don't seem to sync with how the agency is operating with our current consultant terms. So, I wanted to get some input from Wesley and Steve on that, and also the board. And so if we could just approve the water rates today, that way those could be implemented for June 1, the pass-through, and then I would bring back, the same draft fiscal policy next meeting, which is only a few weeks away, after we get input from both Wesley and the finance folks, if that makes sense.
So a point of clarity. We knew that this agenda item was coming up before us, Attorney Jerusik, and you giving us this in-depth detail of what's taking place was very concerning to me, is that we know every year Chicago increases our water rates. And so why should our residents or our water users not be aware of what's taking place for the transparency and accountability of this board? So what I'm asking this board to do right now is to table this, and let's have another conversation regarding this matter, because I don't like how that look.
Understood. So table, just to clarify, table both the amendment to Section 3 and the amendment to Section 9, correct, Mayor?
That's correct.
Okay. Do I have a motion to table?
Motion.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Rebo?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Administrator Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Scalise?
Yes.
Manager Crumstock?
Yes.
Item 3, consideration and approval of engagement letter dated November 15, 2025, and issued by Lauterbach and Amon LLP for accounting assistance and payroll services from July 1st, 2026 to June 30th, 2027, at a cost for accounting assistance services of $2,874 per month, $34,488 per year, and a cost for payroll services of $376 per month, or $4,512 per year. Do I have a motion and a second?
Motion for approval.
Second.
Any comments, questions?
I don't have any.
Thank you. Without it in front of me, I would just ask, is this an increase from the previous year of any sort? It was 3%. 3%, okay. Thank you. I have no further questions. Can I have a roll?
Mayor Rebo?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Administrator Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Scalise?
Yes.
Manager Crumstock?
Yes.
Item 4, consideration and approval, waiver of competitive bidding procurement process due to government pricing discount and purchase of a 2026 Ford Transit cargo van, 3D cargo van, color Oxford white, 5 miles on it with a VIN attached on the agenda from Willowbrook Ford of Willowbrook, Illinois, at a cost of $47,336 with a $1,000 trade-in credit for the Dodge Grand Caravan, which was a 2012 with 66,000 miles. Do I have a motion and a second?
Motion for approval?
Second.
Discussion, any questions? Mayor?
I
any
have
questions?
none. I have none.
Okay. Any questions from board members?
No.
Seeing none, can I have a roll call, please?
Yep. Mayor Rebo?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Administrator Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Scalise?
Yes.
Manager Crumstock?
Yes.
Item 5, consideration and approval of ordinance 2026-04, an ordinance authorizing the disposal of surplus property in the possession of the Broadview Westchester Joint Water Agency. It is a 2012 Dodge Grand Caravan. Just for clarification, well, let me get a motion in a second, please.
Motion for approval?
Second.
My question would be is just not to assume this is the one being traded in, correct? Yes. As surplus, okay. Is there any other questions, Mayor?
No.
Any questions from the board?
No.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Rebo?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Administrator Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Scalise?
Yes.
Manager Crumstock?
Yes.
Item 6, consideration and approval, motion to approve pay estimate number 3 dated April 7th, 2026, issued by DN Tanks LLC of Dallas, Texas, for completion of work on the $1.5 million gallon water reservoir project in the amount of $583,320.64. Motion and a second, please.
Motion for approval?
Second.
Comments, questions? Anyone from the board?
No.
Mayor?
I don't have
No.
any question.
My only question would be for engineering as well on this. It's been reviewed for clarity to make sure that completion of what has been required. Thank you. Mayor, I'm getting a nod of yes, so yes.
Okay.
They have reviewed, so I'm good with that. Any other questions? Okay. Roll call, please.
Mayor Rebo?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Administrator Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Scalise?
Yes.
Manager Crumstock?
Yes.
Item B, old business, status on the expansion of the agency water reservoir capacity to a 1.5 million gallon water reservoir at the 10th Avenue Pump Station site, financing from revenue bonds and refunding of an IPA loan. Updates?
Hello, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning.
Yes, the contractor is making good progress. They're on schedule. They've been prepping the foundation for the tank, laying stone, laying reinforcing. They've been working on the penetration hole for cell 2, getting that prepped, ready to put the piping in and the valve. And they've also been pouring individual tank panels on site. They're cast in place in molds, and then once they're cured, they'll be obviously erected and put on the tank.
Any questions? Mayor
No, I
Thompson,
don't
any
have
questions
any.
from
I
engineers?
don't, I just want to just flag that, you know, when we did the groundbreaking ceremony last week, I thought it was very, very nice. And the engineers, the project managers, the construction workers were very professional, very polite, and excited to be there with us. So I appreciate everything that Mark is doing and the superintendent is doing to get this project moving along and seeing some results.
I concur with the mayor. It was a great groundbreaking. Got to see them working firsthand. Could tell the professionalism that was there. And the engineers that took us on a little tour down below were gracious to do so, and got to see up close and personal the hard work they're putting in. So look forward to a completion of that project. Any other questions or comments for engineering?
No.
Thank you. Item A under number 1 for old business, consideration and approval. A motion to approve private placement bond, note issuance amount, and private placement bond, note to issue to fund the 1.5 million gallon reservoir project. Kelly.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Nice to see everybody again. So this is going to be 2 different parts. I'm going to give a brief description of where we're at. Then I'm going to turn it over to Tom Reedy from Stifel to give a little bit more detail. When we originally began this project, it was the intent to issue a piece of debt and to refund the IEPA notes. At this time, it's now no longer feasible to refund the IEPA notes. So just the cost savings is not there anymore because of the current market conditions. At the time we determined that we were going to do this project, the initial estimate was about $4.5 million. We're currently looking at about $6.35 million in a project. We talked about borrowing half of the project. At the time it was $2 million, and then we would use $2 million in cash, and at the time we had that money. Since that time, we've also passed a debt service ordinance, which in the debt service ordinance, it allowed for us to accumulate cash to pay for costs related to this project, but then also to pay for the debt service related to this project. So we have a debt service stream that brings in about $325,000 annually. As of February 28th, because again, we can't, updating these daily is not an option for me, we had $4.5 million in available cash to fund this project. So we have enough to continue that theory of 50% of the project being covered by debt and 50% of this project covered by cash. The issue that has come into play since we started this project many years ago was the fact that issuing a negotiated bond takes both villages' financial statements to be within 1 year. And at this time, we have a project that's running down the track, and we don't have financial statements from both villages. So we needed to look at other options. And so we looked and talked, Tom and I talked, and we've come up with a couple of options, the best being a private placement with a bank. Basically, it's the same kind of note, but different. So I'm going to let Tom talk to you about the options related to that private placement with different revenue streams, different dollar amounts, different structures.
Thank you, Kelly, and good morning, board. I'm happy to be there. Happy to be here this morning. As Kelly mentioned, I'm Tom Reedy with Stifel. Fortunate to have worked with both villages of Broadview and Westchester in the past. So certainly excited to be here to talk about the water agency's upcoming project, or ongoing project, I should say. We did pass out a short presentation for review. This was also circulated electronically, I believe, before this morning's meeting. But I will just quickly run through this presentation. First, on the first page here, I just wanted to comment on the difference between a public sale and a private placement. So as Kelly mentioned, when we first started exploring this project for financing, we were considering a public sale, and that would include the creation and drafting of a larger document called a preliminary official statement. We would share that along with audits of the agency and both villages with rating agencies. We would receive a bond rating, and then we, as underwriter, would market the bonds to investors across the country. But because of the delay in some of the audits from the underlying villages, S&P would not assign a rating at that time. So in speaking through different options, we've, at this point in time with the project underway already, we've determined that a private placement is likely the best path forward. The difference between a public offering and a private placement is simply that the public offering would be offered to investors across the country, and different investors might invest in different maturities of the bonds, whereas with a private placement, we would market to a handful of banks, maybe 20 to 25 banks, both local, regional, and national banks that we know are interested in this type of project financing, and we would negotiate directly with a single bank on the final interest rate. What we would do is we would look for indicative interest rates from the larger group, and then if there were any specific security provisions, et cetera, that bank would want to see differently, the bank offering the lowest rate would want to see different, we can negotiate those deal points. The marketing of that a private placement issuance, we've got an example of a first 2 pages of a term sheet as opposed to a preliminary official statement, which we would use in a public sale offering. A private placement is a little bit more streamlined in the execution process. We would utilize a term sheet. We would not have to go through a bond rating process. We would not have to engage with any bond insurance companies. But we would compile a term sheet which would have the par amount of the bonds, the maturity schedule. We would have information on the agency itself, the various contracts that govern the agency, the IGA, the Chicago Water contract, and then the annual contracts setting rates with each of the villages and the hospital customers for the agency. And by doing so, we can work directly with a bank and answer any questions they may have of the underlying financials for both villages, but we don't anticipate that they would require the receipt of the audits that are no less than a year old from each village, like we would need to do with a rating agency for a public sale. Any questions on that before we move on?
Mayor, anything?
I don't have any questions.
Okay, great.
Board?
So if we flip to page 3 here, what we've done to this point is compile a pro forma, and this is just a sample first page of the pro forma that we've been working on. You can see on the left side here, we have a 5-year historical record of the agency's financing. Towards the top, we've got operating revenues and operating expenses. In the middle there, we've got your total operating income. And then we've got below that your non-operating revenues, which include the debt service fees that are included in the water rate that Kelly just mentioned, and the non-operating expenses, the only non-operating expense being the payments due by the agency to the Brookfield North Riverside Water Agency under an IGA. And then we've got kind of towards the bottom here, funds available for debt service. And you can see below that, we've got the bond obligations or IEPA loan obligations of the agency. Currently, just the IEPA loans outstanding for the agency. And then you can see starting in 2027, we'll assume some debt service from a new issuance starting to be paid. So this is, I didn't want to put the whole thing because it would take several pages, but we do have this going out 20 plus years. From a future revenue estimate perspective, we're just assuming 2% growth over time. That may change. Obviously, it's an assumption for now. On the operating revenues and expenses, on the non-operating revenues, we assume that the transmission replacement fees, the debt service fees stay relatively flat. And then on the interest income, which the agency has been producing significant interest income over the past several years, we're fairly conservative in our assumptions. We don't assume that grows going forward. So we take this funds available for debt service, line towards the bottom of the page here. And if you flip to the following page, we actually have 3 different scenarios prepared for consideration by the board. You know, when Kelly and I started talking about this a couple of months ago, we settled on a project fund size for the bond financing, understanding that there will be a portion funded from cash on hand of about $3.2 million. So we've put together some numbers in the first 2 options that produce $3.2 million in project funds for the agency for this project. One thing I'll note, if you look towards the bottom left, there's a sources and uses table there. You'll see that $3.2 million project fund highlighted. It's common for revenue bond issues, which is a little bit different from general obligation issues, which many here may be more familiar with, to include a debt service reserve fund. You know, if there were either problems collecting water bills, or if there were you know, increases, if water rates didn't keep up with increases from the city of Chicago, et cetera, and there were problems collecting, and those funds available for debt service were fall in a given year, it's a common security feature of pure revenue bonds to have a debt service reserve fund built into the bond issuance. So you can see there that we do assume a debt service reserve fund of 10% of the par amount of the bonds. That, the sizing of that debt service reserve fund is actually, because these would be tax exempt obligations, that's actually governed by the IRS, who has final regulatory say over the sizing of debt service reserve funds. You are able to fund a debt service reserve from bond proceeds on a tax exempt basis at a level that's the lesser of 10% of the proceed, or the total bond issue size, 100% of maximum annual debt service, or 125% of average annual debt service. So it's the lesser amount of those 3. We call that the 3-pronged test. So the smallest amount under the 3-pronged test that we are able to fund on a tax-exempt basis is that that 10% of par, so $364,000. And you'll see when we review each of the 3 scenarios that we have a debt service reserve fund built in. So the current, or option 1 that we're showing here on page 4 is what we call a wraparound structure, and it would be structured over 20 years for the current issuance. And when we say wraparound, what that means is we're taking into account the payments that the agency is already making on its IEPA loans. So we have lower payments from fiscal year 27 out through 2035 when those IEPA loans are scheduled to be paid off. And then that payment on the existing bond would increase so that we have a level overall debt service schedule over the 20-year period. So you can see here, on the right-hand side of the page, we have funds available for debt service. That comes directly from the pro forma that we reviewed on the previous page, and a coverage factor. So that coverage factor is very strong in this scenario, in all 3 scenarios, frankly. But oftentimes, investors will look to see a minimum debt service coverage requirement of approximately 1.25 times, or 125%. And you can see that our minimum debt service coverage here is about 6.5 times. So plenty of funds available, plenty of revenue available here for the agency to undertake a borrowing of this sort. You can see some of the statistics in the table on the bottom right. We don't need to go through them one by one, but one thing I'll point out is that total debt service under this structure for a 20-year wraparound structure would be about $6,080,000, with total interest paid over the life of the bonds of $2,440,000. So if you want to flip to, well, first of all, any questions on anything I've just reviewed before we flip to the next scenario?
Not here. Mayor?
No, I don't have any questions.
Board?
None.
No.
The only quick question is in one of the write-ups that Kenny did, this is the only one that has the early payout provision?
Optional call provision. Anything longer than 10 years, we would expect would have a optional call provision. Okay. All right, so flipping to page 5 here, we've got a very similar structure, wraparound structure, but structured over a 15-year payback period versus a 20-year payback period. So the advantage to going the 15-year route would be that the total interest paid is significantly lower than if it's paid back over 20 years. The bonds are outstanding for 5 fewer years, therefore there's no interest in those years, and we see lower interest. As I mentioned just a second ago, $2,440,000 in total interest paid over the life of the 15-year bond issuance versus total interest paid in this scenario of about $1,692,000. So just shy of $800,000 less in interest paid over the life of the loan. But very, very similar structurally. You know, again, 15-year final payback period. Your payments in the first years up through 2035 are lower, higher in this scenario, and they're also higher in years 2036 through 2041. But that's just because we're squeezing basically the same project size into a shorter time frame. As you can see here on the bottom left, still assuming the same project fund size of $3.2 million with a debt service reserve fund of equal to 10% of the par amount of the bonds. And the last thing I'll point out here is that while the coverage is lower with the annual debt service combined between the IPA loans and the new bond issue of just shy of $500,000 annually versus about $410,000 in the other scenario. We do see a lower coverage number here, about 5.3 times coverage in the early years. And then as funds available for debt service grow, that coverage does increase. Still very, very marketable. Should give bondholders a lot of comfort that this is an affordable structure for the agency. And then the final scenario that we've prepared here for review this morning would be a 20-year level debt service scenario. And the reason that we've provided this as an option is that the agency does levy as part of its rate about $325,000 in debt service fees, not levy, excuse me, as part of its water rate, about $325,000 annually. So we've structured this scenario for just level debt service without taking into account the outstanding IEPA loans. So if you see the Series 2026 debt service column here, you'll notice that each of those numbers are just slightly below $325,000. From a total debt service perspective, you will see higher debt service in years 2027 through 2035, and then as those IEPA loans are paid off in 2035, we'll get back to just that roughly $25,000 in annual debt service. You can see from a coverage perspective, still very healthy coverage of the funds available for debt service over the actual debt service with a minimum of about 4.66 times coverage, and that will jump up significantly once those IEPA loans are paid off. As Kelly mentioned, the IEPA loans have a low enough interest rate where in the current market environment, it wouldn't be advantageous to the agency to pay those off and issue bonds with a lower interest rate as it may have been a few years ago. So we're not considering refinancing those at this time. But they would share a lien parity with the new bond issue, meaning they wouldn't, in the event of revenues falling below expectations, and if there were ever trouble, which we would not anticipate, if there were ever trouble making debt service, both the IEPA loans and the bondholders for the Series 2026 bonds would have a parity lien, meaning they would have to share those, whatever revenues were available. One wouldn't be in front of the other. From a total interest perspective, we were higher than the 15-year option, but lower than the 20-year wraparound option. And that's because we're amortizing more principal in those years 27 through 2035. So as more debt is paid off more quickly, the total interest is lower, but because it's a 20-year structure versus a 15-year structure, we're kind of in the middle of those two options from a total interest perspective. And our goal in solving this scenario here was to show the agency how much you could anticipate borrowing by fully maximizing that $325,000 revenue stream. So if you do look at the project fund here, highlighted in blue on the bottom left, it is about $620,000 higher than either of the two first scenarios that we reviewed. So about $3,820,000 in expected proceeds for the project fund. And we actually, I mentioned the three-prong test. The option that's the lowest in this scenario is actually 100% of maximum annual debt service. So you'll see that debt service reserve fund is actually slightly lower in this scenario than it would have been in the first two scenarios. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions. I suppose with this information in hand, and I should mention, we can update our numbers to show different project sizes being funded from the bonds versus funds on hand. Whatever the agency decides on that front, we're happy to run different scenarios and show them to the board. But I think the feedback that we'd be looking for this morning is just generally what size of a bond issue the agency would like to pursue, the general timing for sale. We've already started working on that term sheet. The pro forma is in fairly good shape, so we can update our numbers fairly quickly and go to market, to the bank market as quickly as you would like for us to. And then lastly, we just need to make sure that we have the full legal team in place for the issue. So don't need necessarily answers to those this morning, but I think that feedback over the next couple weeks would be helpful for our next steps. So happy to take any questions or hand it back over to Kelly.
I have a few more items I want to point out. Okay, when looking at the three scenarios that provided, obviously the 20-year utilizing the full value of the debt service rate, that one is 100% covered. On the 20-year wraparound debt, we actually would end up by the 20th year having over $500,000 extra in that rate structure. In year 10, when the bonds would become callable, we would still have about $1.2 million sitting in that bank account to look at calling bonds early. Okay, so the 20-year wraparound function allows for us to have money available to potentially call them early. The 15-year debt service, unfortunately, would be about $450,000 short, okay, without making any changes to the rate structure on that refunding, on that rate structure. So on the 15-year, if we were to do that, there would have to be an increase in the debt service rate slightly to cover that shortfall, okay? So I just wanted to make sure you guys were aware that in our current structure, the 20-year wraparound, we have extra money, probably could call it early even. The 20-year using 100% of the debt service, we'll have enough money in the debt service. There may be some surpluses depending on usage. If water usage goes up, we get more revenue. We may be able to call it a year or two early. On the 15-year, we probably would have to do a 17-year to make that one balanced out. Okay? Does anybody have any questions for either one of us?
When you mentioned the 15-year going to a 17, that is unless another revenue source was generated?
Correct.
Okay, I just want to clear that,
100% correct.
or we would be making some administrative changes, but, Any comments, Mayor Thompson?
Yes, I have a question. Is there a penalty for, to pay off the debt service early?
Not after 10 years.
Not at what year? I didn't hear.
10 years, after 10 years,
After 10 years? Okay.
yeah. Which is right about when the IEPA loan matures.
Okay. Thank you.
The other thing I want to point out is that we mentioned the debt service reserve. It is recommended we put that with a third-party paying agent. Amalgamated is the most common one. There will also be some other restrictive covenants in there regarding reserves and how much available cash is available. Obviously, with the 20 years straight utilizing just the debt service rate, it leaves the most cash in your bank account because the bond you're going to take out is going to be higher. And so you'll have an extra $600,000 in cash that's going to stay within your organization. The other thing is, and you can consider this, if we did the $3.2 million bond that for a project and the 3.6, you could also take money out of your reserves and create that debt service and not put the debt service on the bond. For the dollar amount, I'm not sure that's something you want to envision. So, okay?
I do have one other question.
Yeah.
As it relates to the 10-year, the no penalty till, or allowance for payment after 10 years. What about any funds, and this is the, Mayor Thompson and I, for example, were down in Springfield recently. I know we both pine for the agency in addition to our own communities. If we were ever to be receiving funds for a project like this in arrears, could we apply it towards, what debt we have?
So typically, and this is one advantage to going the private placement route, typically we have 10-year call protection. That's something that investors look for in order to, put up the money for a bond of this sort. They want to know that their money is going to be invested for a certain amount of time. So typically before that 10-year period, paying it off, you would still have to pay all the interest through the call date. Since we are going a private placement route, we could push for a shorter call window, maybe a 2 or 3 year call window, which would allow you to pay off those bonds early.
But let me, I don't mean to cut you off, and I appreciate where you were going, but, and I would anticipate, or potentially anticipate, a smaller amount than the amount due, and it would have to be applied towards the project directly. I'm not making any guarantees. I know that Mayor Thompson and I have received funds locally for our communities, and in some cases, only $500,000 is available. And being that, we're bonding for obviously much more than that, would a prepayment, though, in that fashion, as opposed to putting a 2-year window on it, can you make any prepayments? Would it be going towards anything?
The potential of creating a in-substance defeasance, where you put the money in a bank account and it earn interest, it would also, my question would be, is it possible to reimburse you because you're paying for half of the project yourself? And therefore,
That would be a question, but I didn't know
Yeah.
if they would help us financially in
Yeah,
the
the
long term
only-
of this,
with-
if we were
with
receiving a
the-
$1 million and we still owe $2 million.
yeah. So the only thing I would think of without having a call provision that goes shorter is to do an in-substance defeasance, which is basically you put the money in a restricted bank account earning interest till you can call the bonds.
Okay. There'd be a question for Springfield as well as the
Yeah.
DCEO that handles
Yeah.
those types of things. I just was asking because the project was mentioned to both our legislators. They're both the same. And you never know how things go each year. So surprisingly enough, a few years ago, it was in the 11th hour that Westchester had an infrastructure grant just like last minute. So as an example, I just wanted to be prepared for this. And I know Mayor Thompson and I both pine for funds to offset some of the capital expenses, so that's my question.
Yeah, I would push more towards reimbursing yourself
Okay,
because you're covering half the cost of the bond. of the
Understood.
project.
understood. I have no further questions. Mayor, anything?
No, I don't.
Board members?
No.
Nothing at this time. Mayor, I believe we're both going to be reviewing this and providing some information back to Stifel as to what route we want to take.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Item 2, status report on request for proposals, Collier Station Exterior Improvements Project.
Okay, as you're probably aware, the agency developed a project to do some upgrades to the Kyler Station, new front door, new hatch cover, new sidewalk. We advertised in the paper. There was a mandatory pre-bid meeting on site. 2 contractors showed up. We reviewed everything with them. One contractor submitted a bid for 219 Incorporated, $30,935, compared to the architect's estimate of $60,000. So the architect has worked with them. They're a quality contractor. Guess it's any questions, discussion?
I have none, Mayor.
No, I don't have any.
Board? I believe this would be brought forward then with no questions after review from you. Or with, I should say, go ahead.
So, yeah, is this,
This was a
is this a
status report.
motion just to?
This was a status report at this point. This wasn't to be
It
voted
says
at this point.
status report on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there a timing issue? It looks
No,
like-
no,
oh,
no
I'm sorry.
timing.
Okay,
So then we would prepare the contract
Yes,
and
please.
and put it up for approval.
yes, with,
Okay. All right.
thank you. A, consideration, wait a minute, it is here. Sorry, I didn't read far enough down, so that was just the status report. But this is a consideration and approval, a motion to accept and approve proposals submitted by Furity 19 Inc. in response to a request for proposals for completion of Collier Station Exterior Improvements Project and appropriate and approve expenditures of agency funds to pay Furity 19 Incorporated an amount not to exceed $30,935 to complete Collier Station Exterior Improvements Project. So there's your answer. I was going line by line. Is there any further comments on the project?
No.
Hearing none. A roll call, please.
We need a motion?
Or, I'm sorry, motion?
Motion
Sorry,
for
thank
approval.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Rebo?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
This is for the $30,935 to complete the exterior improvements, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, yes.
Administrator Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Scalise?
Yes.
Manager Crumstock?
Yes.
Item 3, status report on security camera upgrades for all agency facilities. Responses to requests for proposals for Collier Station and 10th Avenue Pumping Station video surveillance upgrades.
Okay, so the superintendent and I contacted 5 different vendors for security cameras. 3 showed interest, which we met on both sites, reviewed everything, and then 2 submitted proposals. One was by Blue Caliber, and the other was by Envision Systems. They each broke them down by station, Kyler Station, 10th Avenue Station. It was a little hard trying to compare apples to apples with these. There were some anomalies. They didn't, neither of them provided a bid bond. Blue Caliber did not submit on the agency forms. Envision submitted the bids after the 10 o'clock due date. So we can review these, and you know, you would have to possibly waive technicalities if you wanted to go with one of these contractors. But basically, Blue Caliber was they offered 2 options for each station. One with the specified access cameras, and one with the Pro Intelligent cameras, which they said they have a relationship with, so they could get them cheaper. and they could also offer lifetime warranties with those cameras. And as you can see, the Kyler Station, option 2 with their cameras, lifetime warranty, $1,900. 10th Avenue Station, option 2, $13,000. And then Envision, they had a different camera, which they quoted $5,600 for Kyler and $46,900 for 10th Avenue. Both contractors at the 10th Avenue Station did agree to, or included in their price is the trenching of the conduit and the installation of the far side cameras at the 10th Avenue Station to cover that blind spot. So, yeah, I guess this is just open for discussion right now and consideration. Any questions?
Yes, I have maybe not a question, but a comment. With this project, you've submitted 5 proposals?
We contacted 5 vendors, and 3 were interested to meet us at the sites, and 2 of those submitted proposals.
Okay, so out of the 2 that submitted proposals, which one would the superintendent recommend for board approval?
He's coming up.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Leslie's coming up.
Oh,
to talk.
okay.
Good morning, Board.
Morning.
Good morning.
So as I was talking with Engineer Mark, I believe that we were gonna go with the Blue Caliber company for both, suggest the Blue Caliber company for both 10th Avenue and the Kyler Booster Station.
And so the Blue Caliber is the one that we're reviewing the proposal for that's in our packet, correct?
Yes.
And then what's the total amount of the project? Because I'm looking at different
Yeah, I see that.
pages
I see
for the
what you're saying
proposal. We need to know what the total amount is.
So here, the Blue Caliber, the Kyler Station, there's 2 options, and 10th Avenue, there's 2 options. Option 2 has the lifetime warranty.
So you get more cameras. Okay, that's the bigger property.
Mayor and the Board, could we actually table this? Because could we actually table this?
I'd be fine with that. Is there certain information?
So, the reason why I'm asking that it be tabled is because I would like to get more clarity on the type of cameras that are going to be installed at both properties.
The type, and I can speak to this professionally, that the first 10th Avenue quote, listed at $29,844, is using a very high branded camera. The second quote, the LS Pro X, are not as, they're not as big of a brand, let's put it that way. I don't necessarily want to speak to their quality because I haven't seen them, but it's more about branding and what's available.
Okay,
So
the
Mayor,
Mayor
now
Thompson.
that you flagged that, what would you recommend as it relates to, because that is your background, looking at technology, because we're talking about very expensive organization and we need
Sure.
equipment that's going to protect the agency. So what would you recommend?
I'm certainly, unless there's further concerns or comments, I'm certainly recommending the Axis cameras. They are a very substantial brand. They're known to handle the weathering much better than some of the other counterparts that are out there. They are nationwide, worldwide, used extensively everywhere in government, from the FBI, CIA, in their installations. So I do know that they're a very well-respected brand. But if there's something else, Wesley, I see you looking, other than the camera brand, I don't know if there was anything else that required further review, and I certainly would welcome that if you have to.
Okay, so for Tyler Station, be option number 1 in the amount of $8,712.63. And then for 10th Avenue Station will be option number 1 for $29,884.70.
And that is going to be the recommendation going
Yes.
along with the Axis cameras?
Yes.
Okay. And Mayor, I would support that as well. I believe that these branded cameras provide some longevity. There's much, I can't speak to the other ones, but I do know there's a significant warranty on Axis cameras. They stand behind their product. There is a local office in Rosemont that, can answer questions or concerns. I don't know enough about either of these two companies. I'd have to take your word on any, and I'm pointing to Mark on this, that I'd take his advice on that. I don't know Blue Caliber personally and don't have any reference history on them, so in
Yes.
terms of the equipment, I'm satisfied. But go ahead, please.
Yeah, and the Axis cameras were specified in our RFP. So Blue Caliber did respond with those two options, whereas Envision only specified this other brand, the GV turret camera, which I don't know too much about, so. They were not as responsive as Blue Caliber.
So I would make a motion for the approval of Blue Caliber Surveillance Option 1 for both items. And with that motion, and I guess that's more for Mike, with waiving the deficiencies that they had in their submittal.
That would be correct. We have to waive the bid bond deficiency, and then they submit it on
Different form.
a different form, minor technicalities.
So that would be my motion.
Mayor?
I don't have any comments.
Okay. I'd also like to note that the proposed Axis camera solution, the $29,884.70, also has room for expansion in the event the superintendent sees any need to find a non-coverage area or internal cameras or anything that he may need to add to it. So the system is expandable, which I find very important.
Okay.
Mayor,
Yes.
I do have a question.
Yes, please.
So with these actual cameras of where this one that we want a motion to approve, it's only giving us a 3-year warranty. So we don't have the numbers for lifetime, because they gave us 2 options, and then on the lifetime one, it was on another camera. So will these be lifetime, because it says up here only 3-year warranty?
No, the lifetime warranty, they were able to extend for these Pro Intelligent cameras because they work with them, and that's their preferred camera. So that's why they were able to offer a lifetime warranty on that.
Okay, only on those, not Axis?
Right.
Okay. That's all my questions.
Anything further? So there was a motion placed forward. Council, is that a
The
formidable
is fine.
motion?
If everybody's okay with it, we would need a second to move forward.
Second?
Second.
Roll call?
Mayor Rebo?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Administrator Jones?
Yes.
Manager Crumstock?
Yes.
Mr. Scalise?
Yes.
Superintendent's report.
Good morning, Board.
Morning.
I
Good morning.
submitted my superintendent's report electronically, and I also included the water use comparison data sheet for the month of April. For the month of April, the agency completed a total of 35 Julie locates along with daily maintenance. The station pumped 94,185,000 gallons of water. And I also might add that the groundbreaking ceremony turned out to be a success. I enjoyed it, had fun, learned a little bit too as well. And then I'm currently working with the Village of Broadview Public Works Director Ames. We're going to be changing the park lights to where the agency property will be illuminated at night. And we're currently working on that now. So I have more information for the board at the next board meeting.
Any questions for the superintendent? Mayor, anything?
I don't have anything.
Board?
Nothing.
No.
Thank you. Do we have a closed session today? Anything for closed
No.
session? Okay. Then, do I have a motion to adjourn?
To adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
You as well.
Thank you.